bodies. And by its embassy in the US, the embassy of the US directly controls the National Agency on Preventing Corruption, National Anti-Corruption Bureau, Specialized Anti-Corruption District Attorney Office, and Anti-Corruption Court. It's all done under the pretense to increase the efficiency of fighting corruption. Well, okay then, but where are the results? Because corruption is still there. It's even worse than it was.
Not only by the instructions from the West, but also local.
Do Ukrainians know about these choices? Do they understand that their country has become not even a protectorate, now it's a colony with puppets at its helm? The privatization of the state has led to the fact that the authorities that call themselves the authorities of patriots doesn't have the interest of the nation, but otherwise they continue to assimilate Russian speakers by force. They are adopting more and more discriminatory decrees. Now they have a law on the native nations, those people who think from Turkey. To forget the deeds without which Ukraine itself wouldn't have access to the Black Sea. Recently in Poltava, they demolished the monument to Alexander Suvorov. Well, what can I say? You are renouncing your own path, the so-called colonial legacy of the Soviet Empire. Well, be consistent then.
Отмечу, что статья 17 Конституции Украины не допускает...
Article 17 of the Constitution of Ukraine doesn't allow military bases of foreign states to be deployed in their territory, but it seems that it can be bypassed. They have deployed training missions of the NATO countries in Ukraine. Basically, that's a military base already. They just call it a mission, and it's done. In Kiev, they have long declared strategic aim at joining NATO. Yes, obviously, every country has the right to choose their own alliances, to sign military agreements. That's true, but there is one. But in international law, it says there is a principle of indivisible security, which states that one country cannot enhance its security at the expense of the security of others. And I can refer here to the European Security OSCE Charter that was adopted in Istanbul in 1999 and Astana OSCE Declaration from 2010. In other words, choosing means to enhance one's security should not create any threats for other states. And if Ukraine was to join NATO, would serve as a direct threat to the security of Russia. And I would remind you, back in April of 2018 at the Bucharest summit of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, USA forced its members to make a decision that certain states were to join NATO. A lot of European allies already back then understood all the risks of such a step, but they had to subdue to the will of their older partner. Americans used them to pursue anti-Russian policy. Some NATO members still skeptical about Ukraine joining NATO, and from some European capitals we get a signal. They are saying, so what are you worrying about? It's not going to happen tomorrow. And our American counterparts are saying the same. We say, okay, it is not going to happen tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow then. What will it change in historical context? Nothing more than that. We know the stance and the statements of the U.S. leadership about the active confrontation military action in the east of Ukraine would not stop Ukraine to join NATO if it will correspond to the criteria of the NATO Charter and if they can overcome corruption. And they tried to convince us that NATO is a peaceful and defensive bloc, so there is no threat for Russia. And they, again, suggest we believe their words. But we already know the value of such words. Back in 1990, when we talked about uniting Germany, the USA promised to the Soviet leadership that neither jurisdiction nor military presence would not move an inch to the east, and unification of Germany would not lead to the eastward expansion of NATO. And I'm quoting here. So they were saying all these things, they were giving us assurances, but these were just words later. They started saying that Central European and Eastern European countries joining NATO will improve their relations with Moscow, will rid these countries from the fears of their difficult historical legacy, and more than that, it will allow them to create this belt of the friendly nations. But it was the other way around. These states are now bringing their stereotypes, their complexes of the Russian threat to NATO. They insisted on increasing potential of collective security that was supposed to be deployed against Russia, first of all. And it was happening back in the 1990s and early 2000s, when, because of the openness and goodwill, our goodwill, relations between Russia and the West were at high level. Russia fulfilled all its obligations. Withdrew troops from Germany, from the Central and Eastern European countries, and it made a huge contribution in overcoming the legacy of the Cold War. We consistently suggested all kinds of cooperation, including in the format of the Russian NATO Council and OSCE. More than that, I will say one thing that I have never said before in public. I will say it for the first time. Back in 2000, when President Bill Clinton was visiting Moscow at the end of his term, I asked him, how would America see Russia joining NATO? I would not give you all the details of that conversation, but the reaction to my conversation looked, well, very reserved, let me put it this way. And how did Americans really look at this possibility? You can see it in their practical steps in regard of our country. Open support of the terrorists in North Caucasus, ignoring our demands and our concerns in the security area, withdrawing from the treaties, arms treaties, and so on and so forth. It still begs the question, why? Why did they do that? What for? Okay, you don't want to see friend in us, an ally in us, but why do you want to make an enemy out of us? The only answer that we got was, it's not about our political regime or anything else, but just they don't need such a big and independent country as Russia. So that's the answer to all the questions. That's the source of traditional American policy they pursue in the Russian track. That's why they react like this to all our proposals about security. You only need to look at the map to see how did the Western countries keep their word about non-expansion of NATO eastwards. They just lied to us. We had 5 waves of NATO expansion. In 1999, Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary were joined NATO. In 2004, Bulgaria, Estonia, Lithuania, Slovakia, Romania, and Slovenia. In 2009, Albania and Croatia. In 2017, Montenegro. And 2020, North Macedonia. As a result, the alliance's military infrastructure has drawn really close to the borders of Russia. That's one of the reasons, of the key reasons of the security crisis. It affected the entire system of international relations. The mutual trust was lost. The situation continues to get worse in strategic area as well. In Romania and in Poland, as part of the US project, they deploy anti-missile defensive systems. We all know that the launchers deployed there can be used for cruise missiles Tomahawk. That is a strike weapon, strike system. And USA is also developing Standard 6 missile. It can not only be used as an anti-missile defensive tool, it can strike targets on land and on the sea. So they are expanding their infrastructure and they get new offensive capabilities. From the information that we get, we have every reason to believe that further deploying the sites, the facilities of North Atlantic Treaty Organization, this decision has already been made. That's just a matter of time. We understand clearly that under this scenario, the level of military threat for Russia will be increased manifold. I would like to draw your attention once again that there will be bigger threat of immediate attack against our country. In American strategic documents, their doctrine, there is such a possibility of preventive work against the missile complexes of the adversary. And who is the main adversary of the United States? We all know that, Russia. In NATO documents, our country is officially directly called a main threat to the North Atlantic security. And Ukraine will serve as the platform for such an offense. If our ancestors heard about that, they would probably thought that it's impossible. We don't want to believe that either, but that's how it is now. I want people from Russia and Ukraine to understand that. Many Ukrainian airfields are positioned close to our borders, and strategic NATO airplanes using high-precision weapons can strike targets in Volgograd, Samar, and Kazan and Astrakhan. Using reconnaissance tool will allow NATO to control the airspace of Russia up until the Urals. And finally, after the US withdrew from the INF Treaty, the Pentagon has openly started developing a whole range of the land-based missiles with a range of 5,500 kilometers. If such systems are deployed in Ukraine, they can hit the targets in the European Russia and also behind the Urals. And the travel time of the Tomahawk missiles to Moscow will be less than 35 minutes. Ballistic missiles, 7-8 minutes. And the hypersonic offensive weapons, 4 or 5 minutes. That's like having a knife against our throat. And I have no doubt they plan to implement these ideas. And as it has been done previously when they expanded NATO to the east, moving infrastructure, military infrastructure closer to our borders, ignoring our protests and our warnings, they just didn't care about that. They did whatever they deemed necessary and appropriate. And I believe they plan to continue doing like that. Because they see us as a dog barking at the caravan. We have never agreed to that, and we never will. Russia was always standing for resolving the most difficult issues at the negotiating table. Diplomatically, we understand our responsibility for global stability. Back in 2008, Russia has come up with an initiative on signing an agreement about European security, and its idea was, its gist was, that no state, no international organization of the European Atlantic could not enhance its security at the expense of security of others. But our suggestion was refuted from the get-go because we can't allow Russia to limit the activities of NATO. We were told that legally binding guarantees of security, only NATO members can have such guarantees. And last December, we have sent our partners the draft document about security guarantees and also the draft agreement on the measures of enhancing Russian security and NATO member security. In response, NATO members and the US were saying a lot of words. There was some reasonable ideas, but they were talking only about secondary things, and it looked as an attempt to bring this discussion away from the main point, and we reacted in kind. I would like to emphasize that we are ready to negotiate, but only on the condition that all matters will be considered as a package in complex, without going away from the main proposals made by Russia. And those have 3 main items. Firstly, non-expansion of NATO to the east, non-deployment of offensive weapons next to the Russian borders, and finally, bringing back the military infrastructure back to the Confederation of 1997 when the founding act was signed between Russia and NATO. These principal proposals were ignored. Our Western partners, once again, they were saying the same old words that every state has freedom to choose ways to enhance its security, to provide its security, to join any military alliances. So nothing changed in their position. They talk about the same open doors policy. More than that, once again, they try to blackmail us. Once again, they threaten us with sanctions. And I think they will still impose those, introduce those as strong and as more powerful our country becomes. They will always find an excuse to introduce more sanctions, regardless of the situation in Ukraine, that is. The only goal they have is to contain the development of Russia. And they will do that like they did it before, without any formal excuse only because we exist, and we will never concede our sovereignty, our national interest, and our values. And I want to be frank, in the current situation when our proposals about equitable dialogue about principal matters had no response from the US and NATO, when the level of threat for our country is becoming greater and greater, Russia has every right to take countermeasures to enhance our own security. And that's how we plan to act. As for situation in Donbass, we can see that the Kiev elite keeps stating publicly about lack of willingness to implement the Minsk agreements to settle the conflict. They are not interested in peaceful resolution. Vice versa, they want to start blitzkrieg, like it happened back in 2014 and 2015. And you remember what how it ended. Now almost every day they are shelling settlements in Donbass. They have amassed large troops. They are using offensive unmanned vehicles and other heavy machinery, torturing people, children, women, elderly people. It doesn't stop, it doesn't cease. We see no end to it. And the so-called civilized world, and our Western colleagues proclaim themselves as the only representatives of this free world. They prefer not to notice this, as if there is nothing like this happening. There is no genocide perpetuated against 14 million people. And the only reason is that these people didn't want to back the coup d'etat in 2014. They stood against the nationalist movement, the movement towards nationalism, Stone Age nationalism and Nazism, and they want to defend their basic rights to live on their land, to speak their native language, to preserve their traditions and their culture. How much longer that could go on? How much longer can they bear it? Russia did everything it could to keep the territorial integrity of Ukraine. We tried hard to implement the resolution of the Security Council of UN 2202 that endorsed the Minsk agreements on resolving the situation in Donbass, but everything was done in vain. Presidents are changing, the parliament members are changing, but the idea of the aggressive regime is still the same, regime that seized the power in Kiev. It was created by the coup d'etat of 2014, and those who chose the way of violence, they admit they see no other way to resolve the Donbas crisis other than the military way. In this regard, I deem it necessary to make a decision that should have been made a long time ago, to immediately recognize the independence and sovereignty of Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk People's Republic. And I would like to request the Federal Assembly to support, to back this decision and ratify the agreement of friendship and mutual help with both republics. We will draft this document and sign these documents in the near future. And those who seize the power and keep the power in Kiev, we demand to stop hostilities immediately. Otherwise, all the responsibility for the possible continuation of the bloodbath will be on the consciousness of the regime that is ruling in Kiev. By declaring these decisions, I'm confident that I will have support of the people of Russia, all the patriotic forces of Russia. Thank you for your attention.
All right, there we are.
Okay, that was really, really scary. That was really not what I think the world was hoping to hear. And
There we go. What do you say, everybody? Let me cam up here real fast for a couple of minutes. There we go. thanks for watching with me. I became aware this was happening. He was giving his speech about 10 minutes into it, so I don't have the first of the speech on record here, but I thought it was important to get this documented. We were watching history. It is scary. It is scary if you are a person that hopes for peace in the world. Now, remember, we've said on this program numerous times that the difference between a terrorist and a freedom fighter is which side you're on. Okay, if you're a freedom fighter, somebody's always looking at you as a terrorist. If you're a terrorist, by definition of some, that means you're probably fighting for somebody else's freedom in your mind. Okay. Yeah. I remember him saying this: Russians are slow to get into the saddle, but once we get in the saddle, we ride. Yeah, I think Thunder, I think you're exactly right. I think he's in the saddle and he's about to ride. He declared the two areas around Donsk and Ludansk. I think I said that right. If not, I apologize, and it's not an intentional offense. He has said he recognizes those as independent, as areas independent from Ukraine, and I'm assuming he didn't really say it, but I'm assuming he is recognizing them now as states of Russia, and therefore he's going to put troops in that area for sure, just to protect what he now thinks is Russian territory. I'm not saying what's right or wrong on any of this. I'm just saying what is happening and letting you, as we always do, we give you things to think about. We don't tell you what to think or how to think. The video part of the stream was from Ruptly, but they didn't have a translation, so I had to find an audio translation. So I was running two streams on top of each other. You were getting audio from one source and getting, there we go. You were getting audio from one source and getting the video from another. Are we watching the beginning of World War III? That is a distinct possibility. If we had had the technology we have now back in 1936 to 1938, would we have been watching what was developing as Germany with the center of interest instead of Ukraine? Would we have known that World War II was going to happen? Now, you got to remember, the United States sat out a large chunk of World War II. We did not get involved in what was then called the Second European War. Generally, world wars aren't labeled as world wars until after the fact. And the United States did not get involved in the conflict in Europe until we were involved in the conflict in Asia, December 7th, 1941, the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor. At the same time the bombing of Pearl Harbor was underway, the ambassador from Japan was meeting with the Secretary of War and giving them ultimatums all the way up until the time, even after the time the bombs had dropped. Sorry, I'm not back in the studio. I'm out in front, and okay, somebody just pulled up, and I wanted to make sure they weren't coming here. Thank you, Truckin' MT. Yeah, if you're a believer in God, no matter what term you may give to your higher power, it's a good time if you're a peaceful person to pray for peace, because there are so many potential dominoes that could fall when you're looking at this from a geopolitical standpoint. Okay, what President Putin just laid out to his country and subsequently to the world was his justification for going into two specific areas of Ukraine, in my opinion. Now, there are so many conflicting and contradictory reports. The United States reports are that it's basically going to be, and it's ironic he used the term blitzkrieg, Putin did, for 2014, from 2014. And for those that don't have a vast understanding of history, the term blitzkrieg or lightning war came from the panzer divisions of the German troops when they just basically rolled through Europe to start what would become the Second World War. And my personal opinion is that Vladimir Putin, a lot of people are saying he's insane. He's gonna, he's too much vodka and pills, blah, 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 blah. I don't think that's the case at all. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. He's getting older. He wants a legacy, and he wants that legacy to be the reunification of as much of the former Soviet Union as he can possibly achieve. And I think he has stated that this is going to happen because he cannot allow anyone on his border, on the border of Mother Russia, to be a threat. And the Baltic countries are on the border of Russia. And as he mentioned in the speech, he views them as a threat. He views them as a knife to the throat of Russia. So I think that I think it's going to be an interesting few days here. My personal prediction is that after this speech, I feel even more strongly about it. I saw something from December of last year when a Ukrainian separatist was giving a speech trying to get the attention of the Ukraine. And he said in that speech on February the 22nd, or he said actually the other way around, 22nd of February, at 4 a.m., you will see what we mean by the new rule, R-U-L-E, rule, sorry. And that's, I remembered that. And we are at the 22nd of February, and 4 a.m. their time is 9 p.m. our time, I believe. So my prediction, based just on analysis, is that the Russian army will move in some way, shape, or form at 9 p.m. tonight. If he wants to really get cute as far as timing, then it'll be at 7:22, which would be at 2:22 a.m. on the second month, the 22nd day of the 22nd year of the new millennium. So it would be 2-2-2-2-2-2-2. And you talk about, we mentioned Pearl Harbor, and the line from that that will always live on is, a date that will live in infamy. So 2-2-2-2-2-2-2 may be a date and time that itself in the future will be looked back upon as one of those dates in history. Here in America, we went through 9/11, but if something does break out and it continues to escalate to a point that they are leading us to believe here in America, okay? And that's the great thing about what we have right now in the internet. I don't think this is going to be lasting long. I don't think we're going to be able to communicate like this for a whole lot longer. But while we can, we need to take advantage of it, and we need to be broadcasting about peace and love, not division and war. And we need to keep getting that message out about peace and love while we can, because the messages of war, hatred, division, they're always going to be there, and they've always been there. And so I think that either at 7:22 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will see a move from Russia, if not before. And that move from it depends, again, one person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist. If you're on the Russian side of things, what happens? The Ukrainian people fighting back are going to be terrorists. And if you're on the Ukrainian side of things, the people fighting back are freedom fighters. So, and they're both true. It just depends which side you're on. And here in the West, we're going to, once any incursion begins, if you paid any attention at all, you know that hair is going to be on fire here in America. There are already a lot of people online that are hyping it up. I'm not hyping it up. I'm saying there's still time to talk, and I hope that will happen all the way up until the very end at either 7:22 or 9 p.m. And man, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I can come back on here later on tonight or tomorrow and say, man, I was wrong, and I'm so glad I was, but I just don't feel like I am. And we need humanity. We need to think in those terms. We need to think in terms of humankind. That's my word for 2022, humankind, because we have human, which we all are, whether we like each other or not, and kind. And if we were more kind to more humans, it would be a better world, in my opinion. So, Birdie Boy, thank you. Let me run back up here real quick. I'm going to close this out and keep monitoring things. Actually, my generation kept us here. The generation before me got us here, Birdie Boy. But I wouldn't disagree. I wouldn't disagree with that at all. It is 2/22 of the year 2022. It will be here in the United States in what have we got? Almost 3 o'clock, in a few hours. Okay, Truck and MT, Thunder, Kime. Just want to make sure I hit everybody. I'm Created, Pat Tolliver. Thank you all of you that are watching, those in the chat and those not in the chat. Normally I pay a lot more attention to the chat, but I was taking notes, and I was kind of paying attention to what the guy had to say. So I'll be back later on. There's no use sitting on here for hours at a time speculating on what's going to happen. I come back on and I report when stuff's going on. So hit the notification bell, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. If you have, you want to help support the show, you can do so through the Cashapp, $ American Doofus, all one word, AMERICANDUFUS, or you want to reach out and talk to me, email americandufus, again, all one word, at gmail.com. So I want to keep this short enough that people can go back and watch it. So I'm going to end it again saying thank you all for watching, and I will be back. It's a dark world. Try to be a light, and peace. Namaste. Shalom. Salam. Blessings upon each and every one of you if you happen to be a fellow Christian. And if you're a fellow Christian, remember, Christianity as Jesus taught it and Christianity as represented in a perverse way in our current society, they're differences. They're two different things. Find real Christianity. I love you all. Peace. Thanks for watching.